Welcome to Doctor's House Call. This is your chance to get in gear with Dr. Gear, a duly trained naturopathic medicine doctor and doctor of chiropractic, board certified in family medicine and minor surgery. Brought to you by Payson Health and Wellness Center at 801 East Highway 260 every Tuesday afternoon from 5 to 6, live on KMOG. You can call in now and speak to the doctor at 474-2427 with any questions, or after the show, call Dr. Gear during regular office hours, 474-7409.
Well, good evening. Welcome to Doctor's House Call on KMOG. Mike Farrell here with you, and good evening, Dr. Gear.
Hello, Mike.
Hey.
Out there in Radio Land, it's great to be here with you this afternoon.
You know, it's looking like it's going to rain any minute.
Well, you know,
wouldn't that be great?
Up on the rim.
Oh, is it right now?
It sure is.
Yeah, lightning is striking. Our closest strike was recorded 5 miles away, so it's getting close. Be careful. Watch out for that lightning.
I think if you're on the lakes up there, you keep getting water on you right now.
Probably, yeah. Okay. Well, we got quite a show lined up for you tonight. As a matter of fact, you have a lot of guests here. And Dr. Wyrick, good evening to you, and welcome to the program again.
Well, good evening. And our guests tonight are three representatives from Back to Basics. We have Christina, who's the owner, and two of her assistants, Janice and Andrea. And they're going to be entering into a dialogue with Dr. Gear and I about nutritional supplements and all things related to diet. So, Christina?
Hi, I'm Christina from Back to Basics. And you pretty much told everybody who everyone else was and what we're doing here, and we're happy to be here and happy to be talking with you guys.
Okay, and so let's start off by just sort of setting the agenda for tonight, the main topics that we're going to talk about, so you can be in eager anticipation of each topic as it comes along. Is we're going to start by talking about types of diets, and then we're going to talk about toxic supplements, and then we're going to talk about testing rather than guessing what the problem is. And then we're going to talk about hormones, thyroid, male sex hormones, and female sex hormones. And maybe we'll throw in a few other hormones as well. So, Dr. Gear?
Yeah, I want to tell everybody out there in Radio Land, y'all better enjoy those 20s, 30s, and 40s, because when you're in your 50s, that check engine light's going to come on. And that means that your whole system is starting to wear down and break up, come apart. And that's where testing comes in, to find out exactly what's going on so that you don't guess about things. And Dr. Wyrick's going to talk to us a little bit about testing that he does, as well as what other types of testing we do at Payson Health and Wellness Center. So don't let that check engine light come on too soon. Check it all out.
Yes, and as I've said before, when the check engine light comes on, don't use a pair of wire cutters to fix the problem by cutting the wire to the check engine light. Don't cover it up with drugs that don't really fix the problem. Diagnose the real problem, get down to the basics, and deal with it. And you'll be much better off in the long run. So let's talk about types of diets. Now, there's a myth out there that all you need to know about dieting is stay away from fats and count your calories. Well, there's a lot more to a diet than just counting calories. So genetically, different people need different proportions of fats, carbs, and protein. And yes, I test that in our office. And patient goals may be different. Some want weight loss, others want bodybuilding, others want just to attain more health in their lives. And patient health also affects what kind of recommendations we might make. If you have diabetes or kidney disease, you need a special diet that's different from what most people would respond to. So, big clue here. It's not true that eating fat is what makes you fat. And the reason I say that is based on biochemistry. Fat is broken down in the body into an energy-rich substance called acetyl-CoA. You don't need to know anything more about acetyl-CoA other than it's two carbons, comes from fat, but it also can come from protein, and it can come from carbs. So no matter what you eat, it gets changed into acetyl-CoA. Now, what happens to the acetyl-CoA when you make it? It can be converted into fat and stored, or it can be burned as fuel. So obviously, you don't want to be taking in more food that gets converted to acetyl-CoA than what you are able to burn in a day. But it doesn't matter so much from the point of counting calories, whether the calories come from fat, carbs, or protein. There are other considerations that I'll talk about, but that's the basic of counting calories. And fat does not make you fat necessarily. Other things can too. So some fats are better than others. So there's healthy fats. So here's an important reason why you want fats in your diet. Fats promote something called satiety. Fats make you feel satisfied when you eat, so that you are more satisfied, less hungry, and less likely to overeat. When your body recognizes that it's got enough fat in the diet, it stops the urge to eat more. And that can be a very important thing for people that just have a hard time stopping the eating. Another thing that fats do is they help regulate blood sugar. And they do that by slowing down the digestion process. For example, it takes about an hour for an all-carbohydrate meal to enter the bloodstream. This makes the blood sugar go up really high, very rapidly. It spikes the blood sugar, and it kicks the pancreas into overdrive. And the pancreas makes insulin. And the insulin tells your fat cells to suck up the extra blood sugar and store it as fat. So anything that causes your blood sugar to be abnormally high is going to make you fat, because the normal response of the body to high blood sugar is to make insulin, and the insulin says to the fat cells, suck up that insulin and make more fat. Get it out of the blood, because too much sugar in the blood causes all kinds of problems. But what's even worse is once your blood sugar is all sucked up out of the blood, there's still insulin around telling the fat cells suck up more blood sugar. And at that point, your blood sugar goes too low. You feel faint, hungry, you crash, and you got to have some more carbs to get your blood sugar back up. That is not the way to go. That is a roller coaster ride that you do not want to be on. Anybody out in Radio Land recognize this pattern? Anyone in the room want to say anything about that?
When you eat carbs, it just makes you want more.
Yep, that's what I'm trying to say.
Now, Dr. Weirer.
Yes.
The increase of carbohydrates in your diet, does that make a difference in the little organisms living in your gut? And do those little organisms then start saying to the brain, Mommy or Daddy, give me more, give me more?
Well, I've read some studies that suggest things like that. I've also read studies where they studied wild wolves and domesticated dogs and looked at the contents of their guts, the kind of bacteria in the guts. And then they did an experiment where they fed the wolves domestic dog food, and they fed the domestic dogs what wolves usually eat. And they found that the kind of bacteria in the gut of a dog or a wolf when eating a wild diet is very different from the bacteria in a dog or a wolf when eating the domestic diet. So your diet really does have a very big impact on what we call the microbiome, all the bacteria that are natural in the gut. And I can't comment for sure. The research papers that I've read didn't actually go so far as to say which kind of bacteria is better in the gut. They only suggested that it appears that the kind of bacteria that's in the gut is appropriate for the diet.
So, Dr. Wyrick, in all the research that you've read, we're talking about the bacteria, but once the bacteria process that food, whether it's carbohydrates or fats or protein, it has to get across the barrier of the intestinal tract and into the bloodstream. So if you're eating foods that your body recognizes as your bacteria might say, hey, this is really good food, but your body recognizes it as an invading organism, and you make an IgG antibody toward it, that causes the blood vessels in the lining of the intestinal tract to squeeze together and prevent good blood flow, and that gives you some, what are those called, those little ulcerations or those micro-ulcerations? What's that called? Leaky gut syndrome? Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, there's a number of things that can go wrong when you have the wrong kind of bacteria. First, the bacteria can make neurotoxins that literally poison your brain, and the most famous of these are bacteria like Clostridium botulinum, which gives botulism and causes muscle weakness.
Yeah, but the first thing you got to look at is you got to get the right kind of food in there, because you don't want any IgG reacting food, because that'll just throw everything off, won't it, if you have too much of that?
Yes, and we'll talk more about IgG in a little bit when I talk about the testing. But the main point right now is each person has their own set of IgG sensitivities, shall we say, and we'll talk more about that later. So I can't give any general advice other than get tested and follow the results of the testing. But let's move on. Let's talk more about fats in the diet. If you eat a meal with a significant amount of fat in it, here's another good thing that happens. It takes longer for your food to digest and be absorbed. Remember I said a carb diet hits the bloodstream in an hour and then it's gone? On the other hand, if you have a significant amount of fat in the meal, it can take up to 4 hours for the body to fully process the meal and absorb it into the blood. That means that your blood sugar never goes up nearly as high, and so your body never needs as much insulin, and it can control the amount of insulin that's made more precisely. So you don't have as much of a tendency to make insulin that says convert the sugar into fat. So the fat actually, in a way, prevents you from making more fat.
So Dr. Wyrick, how about these young ladies here from Back to Basics? Can they tell us about how many different types of digestive enzymes and aids to digestion they have in the store? How many different kinds? Or is that an impossibility?
We have a pretty big variety. We've got your basic papaya enzymes, your chewables, and then a wide range of capsules. You can buy a blend that has all your essential enzymes for your fats, proteins, and carbs, and some individual enzymes like bromelain or pancreatin that are more specifically for certain things. But we have a pretty good range, chewables and capsules, as I said.
Yes, and these digestive enzymes can help reduce the problem with IgG reactions by digesting the proteins down to little pieces that can't cause IgG reactions.
We have a telephone caller, Dr. Wyrick.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, caller.
Yes, what about weight gain? What if you want to gain weight and just eating food isn't enough?
Well, if you want to gain weight, you do the opposite of a lot of what I'm saying here. If you want to gain weight, you want to make sure that you have excess calories, and you want to eat them in a way that is going to cause your body to store them away. But I'd need to do more of a workup on you to make any definitive recommendations. For example, one problem that you may have is you have an overactive thyroid, which just tells your body to burn energy too fast. So we have to rule that out. It could be that you're not digesting and absorbing what you're eating properly, and it's just passing through and never getting absorbed into your blood so that your body can use it. So there's a lot of workup that has to be done to make a proper recommendation in a case like that.
Okay, and where would I go for that?
Over to Payson Health and Wellness Center and see Dr. Wyrick. By the way, are you exercising?
Where is that located?
That's located at right between the American Legion and the 260 Cafe on Highway 260.
Okay, and is there a number that I call to make the appointment?
474-7409.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right.
Okay, so this means that the insulin does not have to go so high, and you don't crash as hard, and the excess blood sugar isn't a problem. No more roller coaster. Now, protein in a meal also slows down absorption, but not as much as fat. It takes about 2 hours to absorb a meal that is a mix of carbohydrates and protein, but that's better than 1 hour. Not as good as 4 hours, because we want to even things out. We want a long, slow, even burn of our food. We don't want to be a flash in the pan, so to speak. Okay.
Dr. Wyrick?
Yes.
We're going to have a presentation every week for the next 12 weeks, starting next week, over at Payson Health. Over at Back to Basics Health Food Store, which is 908 North Beeline Highway. That's going to start at 5:30 in the afternoon on every Wednesday for 12 weeks. And the presentations are going to cover the scientific nutritional feeding of the human body in a cost-effective manner during all stages of life for optimum growth, health, beauty, clear thinking, and longevity. So anybody that comes to these, you're going to learn how to choose the proper food and supplements for your body. So the first one's going to cover the change of life stage for women, menopause, and men, andropause. So if you want to come to these lectures, you've got to make a reservation. They're suggested you do that because we do have a limitation on numbers, and you call the store. The store's phone number is 928-474-8935. I'm sure you can find that pretty easily if you didn't get a chance to write it down just then. So if you want to get into all these great details and ask a lot of questions and find out about your body's ability to digest food in an overall manner, we'll check you out and find out just exactly what's going on. So, Dr. Wyrick, continue on.
Okay, so a lot of people ask, I talked about healthy fats being good for you, but what are the healthy fats? My best answer is it depends somewhat on your genetics and your goals, but in general, monounsaturated fats, that's a big word, but main thing is, example is olive oil is great. It's one of the healthiest fats there is. On the other hand, most vegetable oils like corn oil and rapeseed oil, sounds kind of nasty, so they changed the name to canola oil because it's made in Canada and it's an oil. They're not as healthy because they have too much of a kind of fat called omega-6 oil. And omega-6 oil tends to cause inflammation. And what is inflammation? That's something burning in the body, basically. Your joints can be burning and hurting. Your muscles can be burning and hurting. Your gut can be burning and hurting and developing IgG food reactivities because there's all this fire going on. So you don't want to have too much omega-6 fatty acids. Some are necessary, but you don't want too much. On the other hand, the fish oil is a great oil. It's high in what are called omega-3 oils. And omega-3 oils do just the opposite of the omega-6. They reduce inflammation and have many health benefits, including benefits to the brain. Now, scientists called paleontologists who study the old Stone Age people, basically, believe that historically humans consumed about a 1-to-1 ratio, equal parts of omega-3 and omega-6 oils, and that's what our basic genetics are optimized for. Today, the standard American diet, which is called SAD, S-A-D for short, often has 20 times as much omega-6 as omega-3. Oh, the burn of it, all the inflammation. Even worse, we have trans fats. But consumer demand, since we forced the food manufacturing companies to actually label trans fat content, has greatly reduced because nobody will buy anything that has trans fats on the label anymore. Yes.
So I want to bring up a couple of points here. All this technicality stuff that Dr. Wyrick is talking about, if you're in a biochemistry lab, you really dig that and you get off on it. But here we are for the average person. If in your digestive tract, if you're belching, you've got a bloated feeling, or you're constipated, or you have diarrhea, either one, nausea, passing gas, stomach pains, or vomiting, boy, I tell you, you got a problem going on with your digestive tract. And that's going to interfere with your ability to put all these good food molecules into your bloodstream. If you've got drainage from your ear, or earaches, ear infections, hearing loss, itchy ears, ringing in the ears, all those can come about because you got a bad digestive tract. Or how about this one? You ladies, every time that your periods come around, aggressiveness, anxiety, fear, depression, irritability and anger, mood swings, nervousness. You don't have any of those, do you? Do women have those?
Never.
Never. What are you talking about? Yeah. So, if you get a better gut, intestinal tract, and you start digesting all these wonderful things that Dr. Wyrick's talking about, doing a better job that way, you're not going to have all these things because your gut's going to be working better. It's going to be happy. It's going to be saying, oh, thank you, Mommy, or thank you, Daddy. All right, so how about energy and activity? Or you lay around saying you got apathy or fatigue, or maybe you're hyperactive, or you got, the opposite of hyperactivity is lethargy, or you're restless, or you're sluggish. All those things can come about because of bad gut. So I want to just remind everybody, blurred vision, dark circles under your eyes, itchy eyes, sticky eyelids, swollen eyelids, watery eyes, those can all be symptoms of a bad gut. So Dr. Wyrick, continue on with your intense biochemistry explanations.
Okay, so this next point that I want to make, our receptionist at Payson Health and Wellness was crushed when I pointed this out, and that is that fried foods that are fried in vegetable oil are harmful because at cooking temperature the oil is oxidized and turns rancid. And rancid oil is not good for you. It causes inflammation. Have you ever noticed a bad aftertaste when eating fried foods, sometimes from a fast food restaurant?
Yeah.
Icky feeling? That is because the oil that they're using is too old, it's been used too long, and it's gone rancid. Not good for you. And then...
So Dr. Wyrick.
Yes.
How do you handle that when you go into a restaurant and you want to eat something there and you want something that's a fried food? What's the first thing you need to ask the waitress?
When was the last time you cleaned or changed your oil? But of course, Nancy Reagan's advice is even better. Just say no to fried foods, because even if the oil isn't rancid, it's probably an oil that is too high in omega-6 and doesn't have any omega-3s in it.
So Nancy Reagan was the daughter of one of the first neurosurgeons in Phoenix, and he educated her about the nutrition of the nervous system when she was a young girl growing up. So it's very important that we all understand this and know that what we're talking to you about now is not our by guess and by golly, and not something that we just dreamed up, This is real science, real information. And we take it from the scientific classroom, like Dr. Wyrick is bringing to you, and we put it into the practical reality. And these ladies over at Back to Basic understand some of this stuff, and they can point you into some really good ways of handling it so that you can digest your food better. And if they can't do it, they'll send you over to us so that we can fully diagnose your problem and get you back into good nutrition and good health. So hang in there, Dr. Wyrick.
Okay, and almost finished talking about fats, but what about saturated fats? A lot of people hear the message over and over again, saturated fats are bad, they're evil. Well, we need saturated fats in our diet. Part of our cells are made out of saturated fats. Can't have cells without saturated fat. So within limits, butter, coconut oil, and so forth are healthy fats. Don't go overboard. And it depends on your genetics as well. And I notice that it is really blowing up a storm outside now. So if our studio gets transported to Kansas, hopefully we'll stay on the air.
Yeah, winds are coming out of the northeast at 24 miles an hour right now and gusting a little bit higher than that. It's raining in some parts of town, but not here yet.
Okay, let's move on. Food sensitivities, often called food allergies, but there's a little bit of a technical distinction here that I won't dwell on too much. So it just seems that some good foods, everybody says that's a good food, you should eat it. They disagree with some people. And it's not easy to predict which foods will disagree with different people. But here's an example. There is a genetic deficiency in a certain enzyme that's needed to digest milk. Specifically, to digest, the enzyme is called lactase. And that can give a person gas and bloating when they drink milk. And yes, I know how to test for this problem. At Back to Basics, do you have some supplements that can help people with lactose intolerance?
Definitely.
And do you carry milk products and so forth that are low lactose, or do you?
Not really. Mostly alternative nut milks and like plant-based cheeses and yogurts and stuff.
But you have things like lactate and lactase enzyme that yeah. So if you really crave the dairy and don't tolerate dairy, you might be able to get by with taking the proper enzyme before you drink the dairy or eat the dairy.
They have a lot of alternative dairy, like non-dairy products now that are tastier. They're not so bad these days.
Lots of options. Here's another example. Many people have a genetic propensity to react badly to gluten, which is found in wheat, rye, and so forth. But here's another thought. There is more than just gluten in wheat and other grains. There is also something called monosodium glutamate. And some people that say that they don't tolerate wheat and think they're gluten intolerant, they're really intolerant to MSG. And you need to know which is which so that you can properly choose your diet. There's no point in going on a gluten-free diet when you really need to be on a low MSG diet. And we can test for that.
That makes sense.
And these kinds of food sensitivities or genetic propensities are not food allergies because, technically speaking, they don't cause the immune system to react the way it does for an allergy. But we do have true food allergies. And the two that I want to talk about are called IgE and IgG reactions. And they're very different in their characteristics. Now, I know that this is a little bit technical, but I have to give names to these two different kinds of allergies. So we'll use the technical words. Ig is an abbreviation for a big long word, immunoglobulin, which means it's a protein made by the immune system. And immunoglobulins are what help our immune system recognize some kind of foreign protein that should not be found in the body. So when you go to get vaccinated against COVID, the goal is to have your body make immunoglobulins against the proteins that are found in the virus. And so sometimes IgG is good for us. Other times when it's against a food, or even worse, against our own body, which would be an autoimmune disease, we don't want the IgG reactions. And then we have the IgE. That is a particular kind of immunoglobulin that causes anaphylactic reactions. Big word, means severe allergy attack. Reactions that are very rapid after exposure, can cause your airway to swell up, can cause you to get hives, and in some cases can be fatal if not promptly treated with an EpiPen. So IgE reactivity testing is usually done by an allergist, an MD or DO allergist, by putting a small amount of the substance on or into the skin and then looking for a reaction, a red, swollen bump on the skin or red patch of skin. That's an IgE reaction. But what I want to focus on is the IgG reaction, which is a different kind of reaction that's more subtle and slow. Something you eat today may cause a problem tomorrow or the next day. But it can also have a big impact on health. Both Dr. Gear and I do the IgG reaction testing in our office using a finger prick to draw a small amount of blood, which we send out to a lab. And our test will check for sensitivity to 154 different foods. And these IgG food sensitivities can cause inflammation in the body. I keep saying inflammation, inflammation. It's really the primary cause of premature aging and many chronic diseases. And the inflammation can cause abdominal distress, as Dr. Gear has already talked about. It can also cause arthritis, just feeling blah, and in some cases can promote weight gain. So, a lot of detailed information. People want the bottom line, and so a lot of people ask me, what kind of diet is best for me? And they say, is it the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, the Jenny Housett diet? All these different kinds of diets. Well, I'm going to say avoid all the fad diets. So what is a fad diet? That's any diet that has a book written about it. So the Atkins diet, the Zone diet, the paleo diet, the South Beach diet, Jenny Housett, Mediterranean, many more diets that are out there. Keto diet, yes. And there's vegetarian diets and all kinds of diets. Any of these diets, and there's many of them, might be a good starting point, but none of them are likely to be optimal for any real person. So they all have to be tweaked according to your individual genetics, your goals, and health situation. And that's where Dr. Gear and I come in as advisors as to how to take a starting point and move forward.
In fact, Dr. Wyrick, let me tell everybody out there that you've probably heard experts tell you to eat less red meat and carbohydrates, and they tell you to eat more fruits and vegetables with a complementary combination of grains, beans, nuts, and animal proteins. Is that what you ladies hear a lot? You're supposed to eat that kind of food?
I would say that probably the general public is taught that, but after working in this industry for a while, we don't necessarily think that that is the facts, though.
Exactly.
There's variations to it.
So the problem is that the foods that people eat when they have chronic aggravating symptoms in their lives might be toxic to them. And that's what Dr. Wyrick was just talking about with the IgG reactions. So we have a way of finding that out. But every person's body reacts to foods differently. Some reactions to foods, example, or allergies, are obvious. The body responds quickly with symptoms like hives, a rash, difficulty breathing, and even potentially life-threatening reactions, as Dr. Wyrick mentions, anaphylactic shock, where your throat swells up and you can't breathe. Well, those are pretty rare, but when they happen, they're really scary. Most of the body's negative reactions to food toxicity are not so obvious. Patients often suffer through years and even decades with symptoms that they believe are unavoidable conditions to life. The adverse symptoms of many toxic food reactions are misdiagnosed or are covered over with a medication, creating dependency on prescriptions rather than encouraging the body to heal. In fact, a good friend of mine, a psychiatrist that we all know, has said to me, yeah, we MDs have a really good business plan, don't we? You know what that is? You treat people with a symptom drug, but you don't fix the problem. And so you treat and treat and treat. The problem is that condition keeps eating away at the body because you're not getting the right kind of nutrition in to keep the tissues healing. So, what we do over at Payson Health and Wellness for people who have tried everything, and we have a lot of patients like this, and we measure the blood samples reaction to each food on a graduating scale. That's our IgG testing that we do. So we can be confident that a food which causes a toxic reaction contributes to or even causes the symptoms or condition. Scientists haven't discovered a way to correlate the severity of toxic reactions with the specific symptoms, but we know that if you've got IgG reacting foods and you eat them, you're not going to be good in shape. You're going to be in bad shape. And if you get rid of all those things, it's astounding how much better you feel in just a couple of weeks. And I'll tell you, then if you go back and start eating one of those foods, you get slapped up alongside the head real quick, like, straighten you right out. At least that's the way we like to think of it, and it really works that way because I've done it myself. I'm a human being too, darn it. Okay, well, you ladies have anything you want to add to what we just now been talking about before Dr. Wyrick continues on?
I do have something that I want to ask. Once you've been tested for your sensitivities to, various foods and food groups, is there a possibility after you've been on a particular routine or regimen, does that repair itself and you no longer find later down the road that you have those sensitivities?
Yeah, the first thing we have to do is find out why the person has the sensitivities in the first place. Any sensitivities that are up in the 4 and the 3 level, they grade on a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 0 is that doesn't make any antibodies. The 1s are small amounts of antibodies, but we don't know if they're causing major reactions yet or not. However, in my experience, which is somewhat limited in relation to the humanity of the world, because I only see a few thousand people, we have found that when a person has a lot of number 1 reactions, a lot of foods that are number 1 reaction, it means they're not digesting their proteins very well. So we have to look and see what's going on. Is it a spinal problem? Is it an attitude problem? Is it a digestive bacterial problem? Or is it mommy told me not to poop because it makes a mess in my pants or on the bed, so I'm not going to poop. So I'm going to be constipated all my life. Those are all problems that develop in people. So we have to look and get into the reasons why things happen. Now, we can treat the symptoms. That's not difficult to do quite often. Once in a while it's difficult, but most of the time it's not. Yet, that's not fixing the problem. So we constantly are looking to find the source of the problem. And in my years of experience, I have found that fellow that lived about, Dr. Wyrick says 3,000 years ago, I say 4,000 years ago, a fellow named Hippocrates, the father of medicine. He said, look first to the spine for the cause of disease. That's because in those days, the diet was a little different than it is today. You don't have, I don't want to mention any fast food companies' names, but you don't have them on the corner. You had to go out and dig the roots out and winnow the grain and kill the animals to have your food. So food wasn't the issue at that time that it is today. The structure of the body used to get more attention because we didn't have all the drugs to stop the symptoms. The fellow that started homeopathic medicine, Dr. Andrew Still, was an MD, but he couldn't get people well using the herbal medicines of the day and the various types of homeopathic medicine, so he found that physical structural treatment made a big difference in people. And that's why he started the type of medicine that we call osteopathic medicine, that took all of the scientifics that Dr. Wyrick's talking about and looked at the way the body actually works and getting the blood flow to the spinal cord and the brain opened up so that it would work correctly, so that all the organs in the body began to work correctly. And he found that that was a very good way of treating people. I found the same thing in my career. By the way, for those of you who are fairly new to listening to this program, next year my family will have 100 years of doctoring in the family. And that's quite an interesting accomplishment, because it's all been naturopathic medicine and chiropractic as well. So we look at how the body works. I started getting my education when I was 6 years old, and it's been continuous ever since. I'll be 80 this year. All right. Dr. Wyrick is going to be continuing on, and if you didn't mention our announcement, we're going to be doing 12 weekly interactive educational presentations at Back to Basics Health Food Store, starting a week from tomorrow, and that'll be about 5:30 in the afternoon. You give them a call and get yourself a seat. You got to reserve it. There's just a few seats available. Dr. Wyrick.
And just another announcement here. Dr. Gear and I are both available for free 15-minute consultations at our office. If you call and say you want to come in, talk about what's on your mind and hear what we have to say about possible solutions for you, with no obligation, just call our office, and that is 474-7409, Tuesday through Saturday noon, and we will be happy to make an appointment to talk with you. If you come to see Dr. Gear, be sure to bring any x-rays that you have. If you come to see me, be sure to bring any lab tests that you have, and we'll be happy to talk.
Dr. Wyrick, I got one more thing to mention to you and everybody listening out there, and you two ladies listening here. One of you is real close to this. 1 minute, you're 21. Isn't that right? 1 minute, you're 21. Staying up all night, drinking beer, eating pizza, doing sketchy stuff just for fun. Then, in the blink of an eye, you're 50. Drinking water, eating kale, and you can't do any sketchy stuff because you pulled a muscle putting on your socks. Go ahead, Dr. Wyrick.
Okay, let's change gears now. Let's talk about toxic supplements. So are supplements toxic? A lot of the allopathic MDs and DOs have a phobia against anything that's called a supplement, and they're all going to kill you. But is it true? Well, I have a story about a Swiss alchemist. He was also a physician and a theologian, and he lived from about 1493 to 1541. And he had an interesting name. His name was Philippus Aurelius Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. That's a mouthful. But he's usually called Paracelsus for short. So Paracelsus is called the father of modern toxicology, the study of poisons. He's famous for saying, all things are poison if consumed in excess. Solely the dose determines that a thing is not a poison. And I have an example. In 2007, a woman named Jennifer Lee Strange, she was 28 years old, she entered a contest in Sacramento called Hold Your Wii to Win a Wii. Now, a Wii is a game computer. So the rules of the contest were that whoever could drink the most water before having to urinate would win the computer. After drinking about 1.5 gallons of water, she went home and died about 6 hours later. Does this mean that water is toxic? Paracelsus would say yes. So it's unfortunate that this happened, but it illustrates that even something as necessary for life as water can be toxic if it's misused.
You know, Dr. Weyrich, when I was 12 years old, it was a little fad going around at that time to see how much water you could drink and how fast. And what happened was the kids started to act like they were drunk because the water interfered with the metabolism of the brain. It was too much water.
Yes, changed the electrolyte balance.
It did. So electrolytes are pretty important.
And whether you're a fraternity frat rat doing a beer chugging contest or just chugging water, it's not really good to chug that much of any liquid.
It upsets the chemistry of the body. You know, people don't realize even though we've got all this fail-safe chemistry in us and all these backup mechanisms, it still is very, very sensitive. How sensitive is the mucous membrane inside your nose or in your mouth, inside your lips?
Well, they're designed first to be a barrier, but they're also sense organs that are designed to react to their environment.
And so think about this. Molecules bathe the tissue cells. And if you've got bad molecules for your tissue cells, it irritates the cells. And it was found many years ago that every cell in the body has a nerve-like filament attached to it. That was found with the electron microscope by some osteopathic students back in the 1960s. And it's so important and you don't know this because when you're young, you're eating foods that aren't right for your body to begin with. And they say, oh, well, you'll grow out of that allergy. Actually, what you're doing is you're poisoning yourself to the point where you don't have a reaction to it anymore because you're all numbed up. Dr. Weyrich could probably tell you all the technical molecules that relate to that because of his PhD in organic chemistry and his minor in biochemistry. I mean, this guy's a real whiz at chemistry of the body. He runs circles around internal medicine doctors because he's the internal medicine's internal medicine. Because he understands how it all ties together in a coordinated manner. Not just one symptom that you're going to get a drug to quash, but how to make the whole thing work correctly. Of course, I go in there and I just bang things around and open up the circulation, let the blood flow so that nothing is being starved. So we have to have content and we have to have blood flow, combination. The third thing we have to have is no stinking thinking. And so we get that with our training in our religious upbringing and other philosophical aspects of life. So Dr. Weyrich, I'm sorry I butted in on your parade here. Why don't you continue on?
Okay, so let's talk about some supplements that maybe you need to be a little bit careful about. In the proper dose, they are safe. But $1 million question is, what is too much? So, first on my list is iron. Remember the Geritol commercials where they advertised iron supplements? And my favorite line, maybe not the lady's favorite line, was, my wife, she takes such good care of herself. I think I'll keep her. That was a Geritol commercial, and it was aimed at women, I think. Yeah. It doesn't give you warm fuzzies anymore? No? Okay. So, what about iron? Unless a person is menstruating, or is pregnant, or is bleeding, most people don't need to take extra iron beyond what is found in food. Up until the 1990s, iron poisoning was the leading cause of death from medicine overdoses in children younger than 6 years. They got into their parents' iron supplements or they ate a whole jar of gummy bears that had lots of iron in them, and literally it killed them. So iron is not safe in excess. So, and there's genetic disorder where in some people the iron really builds up even if you're not even taking any supplements. And in general, too much iron can damage your liver, your heart, your pancreas, your endocrine glands, your joints. Really bad news. So make sure that you don't get too much iron. And if someone is not menstruating or pregnant and their blood tests show that they are low in iron, all doctors are taught to assume that the person has a GI bleed until proven otherwise. And that's a pretty serious thing. So if somebody thinks that they need an iron supplement and they're not pregnant or menstruating, that's a red flag. Something is going on here. You need to get to the bottom of it, because it could be as serious as an ulcer or even cancer in the GI tract. And don't want to play around with that. Want to get it diagnosed, and then we'll talk about the fix. So, any comments, ladies?
I think we're good. You've explained everything wonderfully.
Okay. Another very important trace mineral is selenium. But it's very important to get the right dose. Taking too much, again, can be fatal. So don't exceed more than about 400 micrograms a day, and that's both from supplements and food. So the food that has the most selenium in it is Brazil nuts. Eating 3 or 4 Brazil nuts will give you all the selenium you need for a day. Chowing down on more and taking a supplement with selenium in it as well, you very well could be setting yourself up for a overdose. If you start noticing garlic breath, that might be too much selenium. Then we have copper and zinc. These are 2 minerals that are essential. They are important for the proper working of many enzymes in our body. And the enzymes are what do all the chemical processing in our body. So if we don't have proper amounts of copper and zinc, our enzymes don't work right. But taking too much of one of these 2 minerals can cause an imbalance. For example, if you take 500 times or 500% of the recommended daily allowance of zinc and only 100% of the recommended daily allowance of copper, you would think that you have enough copper, you have the recommended amount. But because you have excess zinc, it makes your body think that it doesn't have enough copper, because the zinc and the copper sort of compete inside the body with each other. So there are blood tests that we can use to evaluate how much copper and zinc is in the body. And we can also do a hair analysis, and we'll talk more about testing later. Calcium and magnesium are another pair that go together. Both these minerals are essential. But again, taking too much of one compared with the other can cause an imbalance. Now, the dairy industry is really good about emphasizing the need to drink milk because milk has calcium for strong bones. But when do they ever talk about magnesium? Bones need magnesium too. Mm-hmm. So if you do supplement calcium, make sure that you supplement magnesium proportionately as well. Then we have fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamins A, D, E, K. All of these, if they're taken to excess over a long time, build up in the body. They dissolve in our fat, and you can develop toxic levels of all of these fat-soluble vitamins if over a long time you take too much of them. On the other hand, we have water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C, B, and folate, and these are quickly lost in the urine and rarely cause any problems even if you take huge doses of these, other than the problem of having very expensive bright yellow urine. And so This is just general guidance, but sometimes Dr. Wyrick or Dr. Gear, myself or Dr. Gear, may recommend high doses of one or more of these supplements for a specific medical purpose to address some particular health concern. For example, vitamin A and zinc may be helpful in fighting certain viruses. But don't go on autopilot and take high doses of these forever without medical supervision by a doctor who understands, like Dr. Gear or I. We are both trained as naturopathic medicine doctors. Dr. Gear. So, finishing up this segment, be careful when you're taking multiple over-the-counter nutritional supplements. Many different products contain the same vitamins and minerals. Make a list of how much is in each of the products you take and add it all up. It's easiest to add up the percentage of RDA for each vitamin or mineral. So if you decide that you're taking 500% of the recommended daily allowance of selenium, that's too much. Back off on something. And Dr. Gear, do you have some end of the program announcements?
Yes, in fact, I want to thank these ladies for being here and putting in their little bits that they did, and I wanted to thank them because, there's so much more that we could tell you all. And if you come to the presentation at Back to Basics a week from Wednesday, you'll have a chance to ask your questions personally, and we're going to do a little bit of an examination of you and show you how things are working and how it integrates with the rest of your body's chemistry by testing, palpating your spine, showing you where you have a spine problem, and then explaining to you how that interacts with what you eat, and showing you more information on this IgG testing, on how to find out which food you don't want to have. Because, here's a person that came into the office, said, I'd like to have a soda, energy drink, coffee, or some other pick-me-up to try and boost my energy or focus. I've used, am now, or I'm thinking about using a medication to change the way that I feel, or to help manage my weight. I sometimes feel down, unmotivated, or depressed. I really should eat better, but it's either too hard or I'm too concerned about the cost. I have some annoying or persistent symptoms. Do you have any patients or people come into Back to Basics and tell you something like that and say, how can I feel better? What can I take? You're both shaking your heads, yes, violently, yes.
And a lot of time it's so general. I don't feel good. Well, why don't you feel good? You should find out before you decide to take something. Find out what's causing it.
Exactly. And then people want to come in and buy a whole sack full of stuff, and then in a month they come back and say, it didn't do me any good.
Exactly.
You hear that too, huh?
Yep, definitely.
That's why we want to test first.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this presentation. Come to the presentation and call first, make your reservation so that you know that you got a spot, and get ready to change everything you ever thought you knew about diet, nutrition, and how to be healthy, because we'll get you feeling better if you will go along with us and do what we tell you to do, because we've been there and done that in our own bodies. We know what to do to make you better. Mike, thank you so much for having us on this show and working with us to bring this type of information to people that they can't get anywhere else. And we thank you so much.
It's fantastic. And remember, when you go to our website, KMOGcountry.com, you can get a copy of the program, and that'll be after 11 o'clock tomorrow. That'll be available.
All this technical stuff that Dr. Wyrick talked about, you can go in there and review it.
Right.
And learn more.
Yes, and additional supporting information will be on drwyrick.com. That's drweyrich.com. Go to the Multimedia Archive, and I'll have supporting information available for you.
Once again, when do those talks begin at Back to Basics? On Wednesdays?
Next week, Wednesday.
Okay.
That's the June 23rd at 5:30 in the afternoon. And we're going to cover scientific nutritional feeding of the human body in a cost-effective manner during all stages of life. That's if you've got a little baby in your life, or you've got a person that's maybe up in their 90s. We're going to cover everything. for optimum growth, health, beauty. You know beauty? Skin beauty, hair beauty, nails beauty, clear thinking, and longevity. What's more important than anything else in life? Keeping your brain active and clear until it's time to leave the earth. Because that's what's important. You'll learn how to choose the proper food and supplements for your body. So the first thing we're going to cover is menopause for women and andropause for men. So we call the Back to Basics, 928-474-8935, and get your reservation in for that talk. It's going to be limited in number of people, so the sooner you do that, the more certain you'll be of having a chair. Thank you, Mike.
Aired every Tuesday afternoon from 5 till 6 p.m. To call Dr. Gear after the show during his business hours at Payson Health and Wellness Center, 801 East Highway 260, call 474-7409 or go to his website, drbobgear.com. That number again, 474-7409.